All right, what's up, folks? Welcome, Rhino here with the Daily BA. Welcome to Talking Aloud, episode 2. I wanted to preface this thing with two things. First of all, I think I'm a part of this problem that I want to discuss out loud today. And then also, this format was inspired by a really great man. I'm going to link his channel at the end of this, Macklin, that I got the pleasure to meet. I'll tell that story some other time. But what I wanted to start with today, and I've got some notes here, is this idea of translating the covenant as they talk about it in behavior analysis sometimes. So the science of behavior being translated out of a technical language into something that is more palatable, understandable, and actionable by the general public. And that translating is very extremely important, but also being able to understand behaviorally, like true behavioral analysis, and understand scientifically what's going on and the spectrum between those. It doesn't seem that you can have both, but you can aim towards, one or the other more or less. And when do you do this? What are the implications of trying to translate and things like that? So if you enjoy that, stick around. So we have a history of behavior analysis being a very technical language, just like physics, chemistry, things that look like just complete jargony, uncomprehendable language when you look at extremely complex areas of mathematics, right? That we can get into that level of detail in behavior analysis if we'd like to. And it's really beneficial to have a specific language so that everybody can communicate clearly. That's one of the areas of science that's actually where truth by agreement actually makes a lot of sense, is on your terms, your technology, your language, and how you describe things. It's really the only place it makes sense, I think. And so our field started out being extremely technical and developing this technical language for a long time. Now, there's this development of two things. Starting to work towards translating the covenant, as I talked about. There's a Dick Fox article where he talked about we need to be translating these things, make them palatable for other people when necessary, when it helps us achieve our goals. But there's also this development of mid-level terms. So if you've ever been into acceptance and commitment therapy and checked any of those sort of things out, mid-level terms are things like values, diffusion, if you want to pull from the ACT words that are out there, and they're meant to be rooted in our science, but more palatable for the general audience. And they're kind of this in-between, which is why we call them mid-level terms. And I'll link an article down below. It's really interesting. They're useful to some extent. You can measure those still, like are they working? Are they getting too far away down the cultural side of things and just not really being understood and misunderstood? That is from the scientific meaning. And you can start to look at those as, and so we have technical terms, mid-level terms, and then we have just purely translational sort of descriptions of what's going on. And finding the line between any of these, or which ones do you turn on when, is really hard, like extremely hard. And what's acceptable depends on where you're at, where you're consuming or writing or sharing, right? So largely we have these public outlets of social media, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever it is, right? These sort of public-facing outlets where people are trying to create a lot of stuff, this channel included in that. And then we have our academic journals. These academic journals are really housed and made for that technical speak and language. Really, that's like where it's always been, where it'll probably likely continue to be. And we have some examples of people trying to create things like parameters around what we're publishing should also be generally consumable. I don't know if that's the best thing to be doing. We need a technical place to discuss things, but we have that world in which academia largely talks and publishes in these academic journals in this technical language. On social media, on the other side, then you have a lot of people translating things, trying to provide examples that are useful for people, things like like what I create on this channel. And so what are the implications of this? There's an inherent risk associated with uploading content like this because it is not vetted or viewed by anybody. And so in the academic world, you have this peer review process where you at least have other eyeballs, despite its issues, right, that we know that are there. You're still getting additional like layers of potential feedback and other perspectives to consider. Now, there might be gatekeeper issues, things like that we talked about, but that is not inherently built into the social media world. It's just upload, boom, feedback comes in. Now, there's really good benefits that can come from this expedited upload sort of review though. So like this direct to consumer model of just creating something, throwing it on a video means that anybody can view it. I've had some really, really, really cool examples of people writing in that are either parts of the CIA, other governmental agencies that pay attention to and listen to some of the stuff that we create on various podcasts, videos, and things like that, that are in like Discord servers that we chat with, that just find this stuff very interesting on the behavioral insights and such that our field can offer. But then you also have this inherent risk of potentially uploading something that's just completely off the mark and misleading people. Not intentionally, I would assume most people are acting in good faith, but that's like an inherent risk of this. So on one hand, you have expanding the field and great implications potentially, collaboration, networking, opportunities. The other hand, you have potential for, I don't know, a bunch of negative feedback, a bunch of aversive interactions, things that you don't like, and potentially even worse, I mean, ethical violations, putting a negative image in the field, a lot of different implications like that. And so this morning when I was thinking on this, I was trying to reflect on like, what am I contributing to and what have I been contributing to? Because I was taught that, you know, every single time you define what it is that you're talking about, you make sure that it's conceptually systematic and it makes sense for our technical language and our science. You take data, test, figure out whether or not your data is in favor of your conceptual model being accurate, and is it in line with the goals of the client or the behavioral pattern you're trying to interact with. And like, that is not what I do on social media whatsoever. That is not it. And this is more so of a, I guess, internals conflict thing I've been thinking about, but also in the context of paying attention to what's going on in our landscape right now of social media and behavior analysis. There's definitely been an early wave. You can look back at Behavior Guy on Twitter, Behavior Babe, and these sort of OGs, these original gangsters that are creating some amazing content out there and starting this. But we're definitely seeing an uptick and explosion in the number of podcasts that are launched, social media handles that are out there. You used to be able to follow everybody and kind of keep up to speed with things. It's getting a lot harder. And this is really good for the field, but also it makes me think about, are we losing those true behavioral analyses? Are we missing good science? And you'll hear, I would say, the gerontocracy of the field talk about this oftentimes. I've published some videos on this with like Hank Schlinger critiquing what's going on in the field in different ways. It wasn't specifically about social media per se, but there's risks here. And it's because there's no one that's gatekeeping, essentially, which is really good actually for diversity of content, perspectives in the field. But what does this mean? Does it mean we shouldn't talk out loud, that we shouldn't be able to upload these sort of things? Like, no, not at all. Like, that is not the point of this. But should people be rethinking, anyone that's creating content, written, audio, video on social media, academic or otherwise, like thinking about the implications of these words and what effects they can have down the future, both in disseminating the potential field or potentially even misguiding people into thinking that one exemplar holds for, I don't know, an entire set of a potential human experiences. Like, for example, one person's description of anxiety and their potential interpretation of it doesn't necessarily mean that's a behavioral analysis of anxiety, right? Like that, so those sort of exemplars that work really well on social media and in podcasts and things, they can create relatable stories, but how far do they go? How far do they extend and hold up in our science? And I don't think we're doing that. As a community, I don't think I've done a good job on this channel of doing that myself, on demonstrating the power of the behavioral perspective and the data and the full process. And so it's got me thinking about how I can do that, how I can be a part of that and test it out and see whether or not it works. I know there's some people out there that are doing things like this, whether semi-regularly or consistently. There's definitely people that are out there talking about data, analyzing data and looking at it. But I think it comes with a little bit of a sacrifice of view counts, and it's not as sexy to people sometimes, and that's unfortunate. And it's like, if we can find that in between where we can talk about it perfectly and translate it out there and get people excited, but not lose the core processes of making sure it's conceptually systematic and solid, making sure that it's database decisions that are going into it, making sure that it's empirical data, right? Not these subjective sort of things. I think that's super important. But it calls on two other things too. Should there be some sort of like creatives or creators guild where there's like feedback that's provided beforehand? Because right now all we have is this comment section, and it's after you upload. And I've been a part of this problem where I've watched someone's video and I was like, this is amazing, or read their post or whatever it is, and commented like, but what about this or what about that? And it's perceived as like this isn't sufficient enough, or some sort of negative comment, or some sort of like things weren't good enough. And like, that's not the intent. You lose that intent when you're in a comment section, right? You lose those sort of contextual variables is what I mean there by intent. And facial reactions, tone of voice, things like that. And so it's almost like how you have the peer review process of uploading things and publishing them after they've been reviewed and kind of critiqued. That'd be useful, but it's not a part of the internet. Like, that's not the beauty of the internet. The beauty of the internet was anybody could do anything they possibly wanted. But like, we're missing that creators guild where it's like, hey, I'm considering putting this out. What do you think? You can build it yourself, but like on a larger, grander scale. I think we're missing that, and that'd be really cool. I don't know if I want to build it necessarily. It sounds like a lot of an undertaking, but I would love to be a part of that and listen to that. And it would, I think, help us make things better for the field later on. Because, and I've been kind of saving this, but the biggest risk that we have of this issue, I think right now, and what I'm potentially contributing to, is that a new member to the field and somebody that is naive to things they don't know, the old saying, like, you don't know what you don't know, 100% reigns true here, where if you're finding someone on a social media algorithm or hashtag and you're like, this is really cool stuff, which I know people find this channel through those sort of ways, and you watch one video where maybe I'm just sort of trying to interpret and describe a situation, but it's not like the full picture, that could be misleading. That could mislead people into thinking that what they've learned is sufficient enough to take elsewhere, and applies everywhere. And of course, part of that's on the consumer, but we can't really blame the learner. It's more like a need for a better systematic solution. And so I guess I've been thinking and worrying about, like, to what degree am I misleading, not intentionally, but misleading because of just not quite the right instructional design on videos and content and posts and adding that context. Because you only put so much out there, but selecting what you're gonna put out there is really important, and has these far-reaching effects. So to close, this had me also thinking about, like, what are ways in which you can make sure that you're doing the best that you can. And so clearly establishing feedback loops prior to uploading would be one that's very critical. It's things I've started to add more and more into my processes over the last couple of years, and it's super beneficial, even if it's a little tricky to go through, like, you wanted to upload and include something that someone else doesn't think is important, but that's a beneficial process. I think also I'd encourage keeping a foot in as many places as you possibly can. You get a risk of not being able to consume anything potentially, but if you know a bit of what's going on in different camps of behavioral science or different fields that are interested in human behavior, whether it be economics, behavior analysis, psychology, whatever, right? Keeping feet in different areas gives you different perspectives to potentially rely on. Fact checking and questioning the people that are uploading stuff, like, that is extremely critical. And providing constructive criticism, which I get is really tricky. That's part of the, like, I don't know if you can do that well in these mediums, but even if it's a DM, like, critical feedback is really useful. Not critical, constructive. I meant constructive. Constructive, like, well-articulated feedback is really useful. And it's in short supply since everybody's so busy. And I get that nobody owes anybody feedback, but I guess just know that those things really help shape content creators like myself in the field. So I'd be curious what your thoughts are, whether or not you think this is even something to be worrying about, maybe how you go about handling it. This is, like I said, a talk aloud sort of thing. It's not meant to be a solution. It's not meant to be anything outside of like just a discussion in the corner of the internet for the next 12 hours or whatever this video length kind of sticks around for. So thanks y'all. Hope you're doing well. And things that I've referenced are linked down below, so check them out.